Dr. Yun, a beautiful veterinarian, has opened a clinic in the countryside. She's now going around putting up flyers for her clinic because business is slow and her financial situation is really bad. She goes to give a cow an injection and talks to the cow saying, "Be a good cow and give me your back so we can get this over with quickly and make it easier for both of us." But the cow acts stubbornly, making it really hard for Yun to give the injection. Her mother calls her, reminding her that tonight is the university reunion and she must attend. Yun hesitates, not wanting to go, but her mother pressures her, hoping she might find a suitor there. Yun agrees reluctantly, goes back home, puts on a simple suit, and heads to the restaurant where the reunion is being held. She picks up a plate of food and sits down with her friend, continuing to eat. Her friend tells her to stop eating so much, saying, "All you care about is food. You're beautiful, but staying in the countryside will make it hard for you to find a match. Look, many guys wanted to date you back in college." She makes Yun look at the doctors who were with them in college, hoping she might be interested in one. However, Yun is surprised by their appearances and their potbellies, saying, "No, I won't date any of them." Then Dr. Yuri, a former rival from college, arrives and starts to annoy Yun with comments about how difficult it must be to have a clinic in the countryside, dealing with farm animals instead of valuable pets like dogs and cats. Yun stays quiet, trying to ignore the remarks. On the other side of the story, there's Lo, a charismatic and very successful businessman. He arrives at his company to find that they have brought in a dog for a commercial. He is puzzled and asks why the dog is there, learning that the dog will be featured in an advertisement for one of his company's products. He isn't very convinced, but goes to watch the commercial shoot to get it over with. The dog runs away from the set, frustrating Lo. He tells an employee named Kang to finish the ad and inform him when it's done, then leaves. But he is surprised to find the dog on the stairs. He says, "Come here, you dog, you son of a dog," trying to catch it, but the dog runs out into the street. At this time, Yun leaves the restaurant and walks, feeling a bit down. She sees a dress in a shop window and stops to look at it, feeling sad that she can't buy it or enjoy life due to her poverty. She continues walking and sees a drink shop, saying to herself, "You came at the right time." She sits inside, gets a juice bag, and starts drinking. She keeps sipping until she hears a honking sound. She looks up and sees Lo's dog, realizing it's thirsty from the heat. Feeling sorry for the dog, she gets some water and gives it to the dog, treating it kindly. Lo sees his dog and approaches, grabbing the leash. The dog doesn't move, surprising Yun with Lo's behavior towards the dog. She asks, "Who are you anyway?" He responds, "The dog's owner, satisfied?" She glares at him and says, "Oh, the king, right?" He replies, "No, I rented it." She says, "Whatever, idiot. That doesn't give you the right to treat the dog like that." She tells him the dog is hot, and he says, "Mind your own business." Kang arrives, and together they take the dog back to the shooting location, completing the commercial. Yun returns home, sees her cat, and scolds it for getting fur all over her clothes, making her look bad at the restaurant. She then calms down, feeds the cat, and apologizes, saying, sorry, as the cat eats. Yun talks to the cat about what happened and continues her work treating farm animals. A few days later, she calculates her income, wondering when she'll be able to pay off her student loans so she can start paying off her clinic loan. Her stomach growls from lack of food, so she gets up to make an egg and enjoys eating it while talking to her cat, saying, "You know, if I had money, I'd eat meat every day until I burst. Don't worry, I'll feed you salmon too. I'll take care of you." She wishes for a day when her financial situation improves. One day, Lo gets into his car, but is attacked by 3 criminals who drug and kidnap him. He wakes up tied up, with the criminals in front of him. When one approaches, he pretends to still be unconscious. He suddenly attacks and fights them, but one of the criminals stabs him in the stomach. Shocked, Lo fights back, escapes despite his injury, and manages to hide from them. Meanwhile, Yun is walking down the street in the rain wearing a coat. She finds Lo lying in front of her clinic and is scared, but approaches, realizing he's injured. She decides to call emergency services, but Lo stops her, saying no. He faints, so she helps him inside the clinic, slapping his face in hopes of keeping him conscious. She tells him, "I'm a vet, and I'll try to help you, okay?" He nods, and she starts treating him, successfully stopping the bleeding. As she gets up, He grabs her hand unconsciously, so she stays with him, falling asleep beside him from exhaustion. The next morning, Lo wakes up to her snoring like music. Remembering what happened, he realizes she saved him. He gets up, writes his phone number on a card for her to contact him, and leaves. Unfortunately, her cat knocks the card into the trash bin. Yoon wakes up, surprised he's gone without saying anything despite her saving him. Lo returns to his manager, Kong, who takes him home and brings a doctor to check on him. The doctor says the wound was stitched very well and that the person who did it is skilled. After a while, Lo remembers Yoon and resumes his normal life, waiting for her to contact him. A few days pass, but there's no sign of Yoon contacting him. Lo is puzzled why she hasn't called. He asks his assistant, Kong, to gather all the information about her. He learns that she is 30 years old and has taken out a loan to open her clinic. He decides he wants to compensate her. A few more days go by, and each day he anxiously asks Kang if she has called. When he loses hope, he decides to visit her clinic himself. One day, Lo goes to her clinic, but before he gets out of the car, he is surprised to see Kong behind him. He asks, "Why are you here?" Kong explains that his mother has been worried about him since the incident and didn't want him to be alone. Lo asks him if he is going to get out of the car, and Kong says, "Why not?" Lo looks at the clinic and sees Yoon, getting lost in thought about her. He smiles, takes out his phone, and snaps a photo of her laughing, showing that he is quite taken with her. Another day, after dropping off Kong, Lo goes to Yoon's clinic but doesn't find her there. Feeling disappointed, he starts to leave, but then he sees her riding by on her bicycle. He is struck by her beauty and calls out to her. Yoon stops, surprised by his appearance, and remembers him as the person she saved. She takes him to her clinic. He sees her cat and tells her to keep it away. She dismissively says, "Just leave it alone," and they sit down. She asks him what he wants, and he asks her why she never called. He tells her he's there to see what she wants as compensation for saving his life. She writes down the cost of the medicines she used to treat him. He looks at the note and is puzzled by the small amount, asking if that's all. She says the medicines are expensive, but tells him to forget it. He responds that the cost is way too little for saving his life and asks her to name her price. She stays silent. He sees the cat approaching again and tells her to move it away. She looks at him with disgust, stands up and steps on a toy, causing her to fall. He catches her, and as they look at each other, her face turns red with embarrassment, and she pulls away. Lo thinks for a moment and tells her he has found the right compensation for her. He takes her to a large place in a fancy area, telling her to take it and open her clinic there, and he will pay for it, so they will be even. However, she refuses, saying she built her clinic with her hard work and has a loan to pay off. He is surprised and asks how. He gets angry and decides to make her accept his compensation. He sets up a test to see what she will do. He buys the building where her clinic is located and has the former owner inform her that there is a new owner and that the building will be demolished in a week. The old owner leaves, and she slumps over her desk, not knowing what to do. She gets a call, and Lo tells her that he bought the building and will tear it down. He challenges her to see if she will give up and come to him. He hangs up, leaving her frustrated. She calls him an idiot, starts researching him, and learns that he is very wealthy. She calls him and sarcastically asks if he thinks he's strong for what he's doing. He replies confidently, "Yes," feeling pleased with himself. She tells him she won't give up, hangs up, talks to her cat, and says they need to find a new place. She goes out and searches many places, hoping to find a new location for her clinic. She keeps searching until she's about to pull her hair out due to the high prices. After thinking for a while, she decides to take out another loan. However, the bank refuses to give her a new loan until she pays off the existing one. She tries several banks throughout the week, but to no avail. On the last day, Kong, disguised as a worker, arrives with two others to demolish the building. He tells her, "Come on, get out so we can tear this place down." She retorts, "Get out, I'll tear you apart." Lo, who is on the phone with Kang, hears this and laughs, telling Kang to return as the plan worked perfectly. He thinks to himself that she will surely give up and come to him. Indeed, that same day, Yoon, feeling very frustrated, puts on her best outfit and goes to Lo's company. She approaches him and hits him with her bag, calling him an idiot and saying this is her reward for saving his life. She starts crying, and he tries to comfort her, suggesting she work with him. She looks at him with disgust. She then receives a call from her friend Jim saying she has something trivial to finish and will meet her soon. After hanging up, she tells Lo to back off, threatening to go to the press with his actions. He nonchalantly replies, "Is that all you can do?" She calls him stupid, stomps on his foot, and twists it. He says it doesn't hurt, and as he moves his foot away, she loses her balance. He catches her in a romantic moment, but she quickly pulls away. After regaining her composure, she writes down her account number and tells him she will move out of the building within a week. She instructs him to transfer the security deposit to her account and hopes never to see his face again. She shoves him and leaves. He sits there, amused and laughing, pleased with himself for provoking her. His employees notice his enjoyment, realizing he might be infatuated with her. Yoon goes to meet Jim at a dance studio. Their friend Sang, who has just returned from traveling, joins them. He tells Yoon she is as beautiful as ever, making her happy. Sang steps out to take a call, and during that time her old rival Yuri appears. Seeing Yoon, Yuri sits down and starts making snide comments, saying she seems to be adjusting well to the countryside and the animals she treats. "If you had a clinic in a nice place like me and Jin, I'd see you every day. But it looks like that will never happen. You probably won't get married either," Yuri sneers. Yoon gets upset but retorts, "Actually, I just came here to check out a new clinic. I'm moving in this week." Yuri is surprised and silenced, and Yoon feels a rush of satisfaction. Yoon then visits Lo and sees him changing his shoes. He asks why she decided to give in and take the clinic space in his company's building. She responds, "Yeah, you idiot, I agreed. I'll consider it a loan from you and I'll pay it back with interest." He accepts this and moves closer, trying to shake her hand, but she refuses. He insists, and she eventually returns to her old clinic, drinking and reminiscing about saving him. She bids farewell to her old clinic and heads to the new one the next day. She dons her work scarf and starts organizing everything. She stays up late setting up, and eventually falls asleep at her desk. Lo visits her that night, finds the door open, and is surprised she's not afraid. He walks in, leans in close, and watches her sleep. She wakes up and is startled, thinking she's dreaming. She touches his cheeks, commenting on how cute they are and playfully telling him to stop what he's doing. He snaps at her, "Stop touching my cheeks, woman." She wakes up fully, embarrassed, and asks why he came so late. He replies, "To check on you, aren't I your partner now?" She retorts that she was forced to sleep there because she couldn't find a cheap apartment yet. He suggests, "There's a room free of charge." She asks where, and he replies, "At my place." She yells at him, calling him an idiot, and tells him to leave. The day of her clinic's grand opening, her friend Jin calls to say she can't make it, but Sang will come to congratulate her. Lo sends a large vase with her name on it, wishing her well and inviting her to lunch. She mutters to herself, "Damn him," and makes Kong help her pray for wealth and success while also cleaning the vase. Kong stays waiting for her at the restaurant, getting annoyed when she is late. She brings simple food and eats with Kong at the clinic. Lo arrives, and Kong, scared, asks if they need anything before running off. Lo sits down, and when Yoon's stomach growls, she realizes he hasn't eaten. She offers him some of her food. He doesn't like it at first, but says he'll eat it for her sake. He tries it and finds it delicious, so they have lunch together. Sang arrives and Lo feels jealous, asking who he is. Yoon replies, "He's a friend." Yuri, the owl, passes by and sees the clinic, feeling upset. She calls another owl friend and says, "Yoon opened a clinic in my neighborhood." They plan to meet and bother Yoon. The next day, Yoon meets her friend Jin and finds Yuri and her friend already there. She sits down, surprised. But immediately the two owls start bothering her. They say, "Invite us to lunch now that you have a clinic in this fancy neighborhood, or are you still as stingy as ever?" Yoon calmly responds, "No." "Of course I'll treat you guys to lunch," Yoon said confidently, but as soon as she picked up the menu, she was shocked by the high prices. She didn't have enough money. When the waiter arrived, he presented them with a bottle of wine. Yoon protested, "We didn't order this." The waiter replied, "It's a gift from the gentleman over there." Yoon and the others looked over and saw Lee. She was surprised and thought to herself, "What's he doing here?" Trying to save face, she said, "He must be trying to win me over because I'm so beautiful." Yoon excused herself to go to the bathroom, feeling the weight of the high prices. She quickly texted Lee to meet her inside. When he arrived, she demanded, "What are you doing here?" He casually replied, "Just here." She told him to leave her alone and then returned to the table. When it came time to pay, Yoon nervously handed over her credit card, but the cashier informed her that Lee had already settled the bill. Surprised, Yoon walked out, lost in thought. She saw her friends and Lee waiting outside and was even more shocked when Lee said he had been waiting for her for a long time. He took her hand and they walked away together, leaving Yuri and her friend fuming with jealousy. On the way, Yoon asked Lee why he seemed to be following her everywhere. He replied, "Go out with me." She was taken aback and asked, "What?" He sat down and showed her photos of potential brides. "My family wants me to get married this year, and I need you to pretend to be in a relationship with me to get out of it," he explained. Yoon was incredulous. "So, you think I would actually believe that you're interested in me?" He responded, "Of course not. Did you think I was really interested in you?" She called him an idiot and refused, getting up to leave. Lee followed her, insisting she agree. She tried to kick him but missed. He stopped her, saying, "You've never been in a relationship before, have you?" She lied. "Of course not. I'm 30 years old. I've had my fair share of relationships." Lee told her she was beautiful and moved closer, causing her heart to race. "You're lying," he said. "You've never been in a relationship because you get so nervous around men." Angry, Yoon snapped back, "I was acting too. Take this." She hit him with a pen, startling him. Later, at her clinic, Yoon reminisced about university days when Sang had given her a bouquet of flowers and asked her out. She was delighted and accepted, but Yuri saw them and became jealous. She approached Yoon and lied, saying she and Sang were dating. Yoon was heartbroken and threw away the bouquet. Yoon had refused to get involved with Sang and decided to enter a real relationship instead. She visited her friend Jin at the dance studio, where Jin asked what was wrong. Yoon explained that Lee had embarrassed her because she had never been in a relationship before. She decided she needed to learn how to be comfortable around men, so she started learning to dance. The dancer held her to teach her, and she was surprised that her heartbeat remained normal. She thought to herself, "I'm fine now. Why did I get so nervous in front of Lee?" Just then, Lee called, and her heartbeat quickened. She answered, feeling flustered. Lee asked if she had thought about his offer, but she quickly said no and hung up, saying she was busy. She went out with her friends and sang, ignoring Lee's repeated calls. The next day at the clinic, she wished for a patient to come. Lee showed up and she was surprised. He asked, "Busy? Busy where?" She replied, "I was busy. What do you want?" He took her outside and said, "Have you thought about it? Let's pretend we're dating for 3 months." She refused again. Lee then offered her a deal. "If you agree, this shop will be yours, and I'll give you an additional 100 million won. Didn't you say you don't like taking money without earning it? Well, this is the deal." Yoon stayed silent and still didn't agree. After Lee left, she sat outside, contemplating how to improve the business. She went back in and started advertising the clinic. Her brother came and found her frustrated due to the lack of business. He encouraged her and dressed her up in a dog costume, suggesting it might attract attention. She complained about the heat, but he insisted it was for her future. Wearing the costume head, she got agitated and started jumping around. She went out to distribute flyers to people on the street. Exhausted from the heat, she returned to the clinic. Sang came in with a female friend and her dog. Yoon examined the dog and agreed to keep it overnight. Lee arrived and asked about the dog, and Yoon expressed her frustration, feeling she had made a mistake becoming a veterinarian because she wasn't competent. Lee reassured her, praising her hard work and dedication. "You treated me and you have a great personality. I invested in you because you're diligent." He then asked her to agree to pretend to date. Yoon finally agreed. The next day, they drew up a contract specifying a 3-month duration, with Lee in control. Yoon had to follow his instructions and not meet any other men. Lee included this in the contract because he was jealous of Sang. Yoon reluctantly agreed and signed the contract. They shook hands to seal the deal and began executing the contract the next day. Although they spent the entire day separately, Lee was bored. He was leaving the company when he asked his secretary what she does with her boyfriend to enjoy their time together. She replied that they eat, drink, and sometimes go to the cinema. Lee thought just that and walked away. Yoon was working and Jin came to meet her, wanting to take her to the dance studio, but Yoon said she couldn't because she was feeling down. Lee arrived and Jin told her that Yoon was now dating Lee. They all went to the dance studio together. Sang was there and was surprised to hear that Lee was Yoon's boyfriend. He didn't quite believe it, so he got closer to Yoon to irritate Lee. Lee sniffed her hair and said, wash your hair, you stink." Yoon whispered back, "Hey, the contract doesn't say we have to be this close." Lee backed off and said he was leaving. He went outside and sat in his car. He had brought flowers for Yoon but couldn't give them to her. He daydreamed about her dancing with Sang, which made him jealous. He called Yoon, but she told him she was busy and hung up. Later, while still in his car, he saw a girl he knew and tried to hide, but the girl spotted him and dragged him to a restaurant to flirt with him. To escape her, he called Yoon and told her to come immediately. She protested, saying it was too late, but he insisted. Yoon agreed to come. Sang saw her and decided to give her a ride. Lee sat with the girl, who kept flirting with him, but he told her he had a girlfriend. She didn't believe him, so he pointed to Yoon, who had just arrived. The girl remarked that Yoon looked too old for him, which angered Yoon. She told the girl to go back to school and leave them alone. Sang came over and handed Yoon her forgotten phone, revealing to Lee that Sang had given her a ride. Yoon sat down, and the girl continued to provoke her, saying she didn't believe Yoon was really Lee's girlfriend because she looked too shabby. The girl insisted that Lee must be lying to get rid of her. Lee, determined to prove her wrong, grabbed Yoon and pretended to kiss her. But before he could, the girl stopped him, got upset, and left. Yoon told Lee to back off, annoyed. Lee questioned why Sang had been with her, and she explained it was late, and he was just giving her a ride home. She said she would leave, even though she didn't know how to get home. Lee followed her and offered to drive her. During the ride, Yoon fell asleep from exhaustion. Lee watched her, mesmerized by her appearance, and smiled. When she woke up, he pretended to scold her, saying, "Don't sleep around others. You look terrible. Only sleep in front of me." He moved closer, making her nervous, and she got the hiccups, unable to stop. He laughed at her. The next day at her clinic, a girl named Rami, the same girl from the previous night, showed up. Yoon was shocked and immediately called Lee, telling him, "The girl you were with yesterday is here." "What should I do? What should I do?" Yoon exclaimed. Lee told her, "You're my girlfriend, so handle her however you want." She said, "But that girl looks like a chameleon, even though she's young." Lee encouraged her, telling her she was strong too and could handle it. She agreed and hung up. Yoon sat with Rami, who accused her of stealing Lee and vowed never to let her have him. Rami tried to provoke her, but Yoon annoyed her even more by making funny faces until Rami got scared and stood up to leave. Before leaving, Rami called her an old lady to irritate her, but Yoon just replied, "I can't hear you, I can't hear you," which annoyed Rami even more. Yoon was delighted and called Lee to tell him she had won. Lee smiled and hung up as he was in a meeting. That night, Lee took Yoon out on a date to a drive-in cinema. He watched her enjoy herself and laugh, finding her very appealing. She ate popcorn until the last kernel, and Lee watched her in amazement. After a while, she took out her phone to take a picture with him, surprising him. "Why?" he asked. She explained, "This is to commemorate our first date. Every time we go out, we'll take a picture." She was upset that he wasn't smiling in the photo, but eventually let it go. After they returned home, she put the picture in a scrapbook as a motivator. A week passed with them going out every day, leaving Yoon exhausted. Jin noticed her fatigue and suggested she take the night off and not go out with her boyfriend. Yoon agreed and sent Lee a message asking for a break. That night, Yoon stayed with Jin, but a light bulb issue arose. Jin suggested calling Lee to fix it, but Yoon hesitated. Jin insisted, so Yoon sent him a message, and he came running. When he arrived, she asked him to fix the bulb. He was puzzled and asked, "You called me for a light bulb?" She reminded him that he was her boyfriend and should fix it. Lee tried but was clumsy and couldn't manage. Frustrated, she hit him on the leg and told him to get down. She climbed up and fixed it herself, feeling very pleased. She proudly told him, "See, I fixed it. I'm smart." Suddenly she slipped, and their noses accidentally bumped into each other, surprising them both. Embarrassed, Yoon stepped back. Jin, who had seen the whole thing, joked, "Looks like things are heating up between you two. Carry on," and left. Lee and Yoon left together. Yoon was lost in thought, realizing that her mouth wasn't just for eating. She remained distracted, constantly thinking about what had happened. That night, she sent Lee a message to flirt with him, but he hesitated before replying. Yun waited for his response, but when he didn't reply, she felt upset. She thought it was good to stop thinking about him and decided to ignore him for a while. She sent him another message saying she would close the clinic for a bit. Lee was surprised and went to the clinic to find out why, but she wasn't there. He kept calling her, but she didn't answer. Days passed with Lee trying to contact her, but to no avail. One day, Khan called Lee, informing him about a party that evening, insisting he attend with Yun to stop his family from nagging about arranged dates. Lee agreed and went to Yun's clinic, sending her a message that she was breaching their contract and he could sue her, demanding she respond. Yun finally answered and came out to meet him. He opened the car door for her, and they drove off. On the way, she asked where they were going, and he told her it was a party. Surprised, she said she wasn't dressed for it. Lee reassured her and took her to a store to buy a dress. When he saw her in the dress, he was mesmerized by her beauty. They arrived at the party where Yuri the owl was also present. Yuri saw Yun with Lee and was very annoyed. Feeling out of place and nervous, Yun stood in the crowd. Yuri approached her with snide remarks, asking what a poor girl like her was doing at such an event. Yun was silent and upset. Lee came over and silenced Yuri, asking her what her problem was with his girlfriend, Yun. Yuri tried to smooth things over and greeted him warmly. However, he embarrassed her and stood up for Yun. Yun was happy while Yuri was upset and walked away. He called someone and excused himself from Yun, leaving her alone. As a result, she went outside, took off her shoes, and started eating. Rami saw her and approached, sitting next to her. "What are you doing here, old lady?" "You're terrible," she taunted, trying to embarrass Yun. Yun retorted, "Hey, you shoe, I'll blow you away." Lee returned, and Yun told him she couldn't take it anymore and wanted to end their contract quickly. She started to walk away, but Lee grabbed her and performed CPR on her in front of everyone. Rami was very upset, and everyone at the party recorded it. However, Yun's face wasn't clear in the video. He took her to leave, and on the way, he told her to consider what happened a mistake. Yun was hurt because she had started developing feelings for him. He dropped her off at her clinic, and she went inside, feeling down and unsure of what to do next. He left, replaying their moments together in his mind, regretting that he didn't tell her he had feelings for her, which was why he had performed CPR. The next day, the CPR video went viral, causing a scandal for Lee. However, the media didn't know who the girl in the video was. Yun wore glasses and a mask, and her friend asked her why she was dressed like that. Yun brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Jin removed Yun's glasses and made her sit down, showing her the CPR video. "The girl in this video looks a bit like you, but it can't be you because her style is completely different," Jin commented. Yun stayed silent, not admitting it was her. Later, Yun went to practice dancing to distract herself from thinking about Lee and the CPR incident. However, she kept thinking about it and practiced harder until she hurt her leg and fell. Sang helped her and massaged her leg. Lee arrived and saw them, feeling jealous. He told Sang, "Get your hands off my girlfriend," picked Yun up, and they left. When Yun asked where they were going, he said to the hospital because she was injured. Yun retorted, "Why do you always say everything is a mistake?" He replied, "The CPR wasn't a mistake." She was surprised and a bit happy. Lee took Yun back to her clinic and bandaged her leg, making her even happier. She told him she missed her old clinic. He warned her not to go anywhere without telling him. Yun stayed silent and fell asleep on the couch. Lee stayed by her side watching her sleep, and stayed there all night to make sure she was okay. The next morning, he woke up surprised to find her gone. She had left a note thanking him and a juice for him to drink. He went to work, worried, recalling her desire to return to her old clinic. He messaged her, asking where she was. Yun was puzzled and didn't reply. He kept sending messages throughout the day, making her more confused. That night she slept, and the next day he messaged her again. She replied, telling him not to suffocate her, saying she was looking for an apartment because she was tired of sleeping on the clinic couch. She gave him the address and hung up. Lee thought for a moment and decided to have her stay with him so they could grow closer. The next day, Yun called the realtor, only to be surprised that the owner of the apartment she had rented had changed. Lee arrived at her door. When she sees him, she says, "You did this. You bought the place, right?" He replies, "Yes." She asks, "Why, you idiot?" He responds, "So you can live with me. Come live with me in my house." She is shocked and asks, "Are you crazy?" She refuses and walks out, but he follows her and stops her. She turns and says, "Do you enjoy annoying me? I wish I hadn't saved you. If I knew you'd annoy me this much, I wouldn't have saved you." He asks, "Why don't you want to live with me?" She replies, "I won't live with anyone unless it's someone I truly commit to." She refuses and walks away. He insists, "I'm determined. I won't leave you until you agree." The next day, she looks for another place to rent and he shows up. He tells her, "Listen, I have feelings for you. I like you." She's surprised and a bit happy, but then he foolishly adds, "I want you to live with me so I can see your bad side, and this admiration will go away because our relationship can't be official." She looks at him in disgust and says, "Get out of my sight, you idiot." He leaves, and in her anger she throws something at him. He goes back home that night, ensuring everything is ready, thinking she will come to live with him soon, and they will grow closer. One night, Sang arrives with a dog belonging to an elderly woman. Yun examines the dog and realizes it is old and about to die. She's very sad and tells the owner. She then goes out with Jin and Sang, eating and drinking heavily, trying to forget everything. She gets so drunk that she can't see straight. Lee arrives and she thinks she is dreaming. He takes her to leave, carrying her home. She partially wakes up and imagines herself flying, saying, "I'm flying, look!" She calls out to him as Sang, which annoys him, so he drops her on the ground but then picks her up again. She is happy to see him and says, "I'm glad to see you." She then passes out and starts vomiting. He says, "Disgusting." He carries her back to her clinic, exhausted, and stays with her all night. The next morning, she wakes up happy to find him beside her, but is shocked to see herself wearing a plain t-shirt from the clinic. She screams, "What did you do, you idiot?" He is startled and says, "What is it, you fool? You ruined everything last night. I will never forgive you. You have 3 days to leave the clinic so I can sell it because of what you did." She asks, "Why? I don't remember anything." He leaves without answering. She follows him, takes his phone, and informs the employee Kong not to sell the building, as Lee instructed. She pleads with Lee, asking what she did wrong. He tells her, "You went out with Song, which is against the contract. I'll make you pay for that." She remembers everything she did and is very embarrassed. She begs for another chance, but he says her mistake was too big and leaves. Yun is very upset and worried. She thinks, "What should I do now?" Then she says to herself, "I'm hungry, I should eat." She sits down to eat while crying. Lee returns and sees her saying, "Are you going to eat or cry? It's one or the other, idiot." He tells her there is a solution and offers her another chance, but says it will come at a high cost. She asks, "Tell me and I'll do anything." He says, "Come live with me." She replies, "I can't." He tells her to pack her things and that he will pick her up to know her decision. He leaves and she stands there confused and unsure of what to do. He goes to work, looking at her picture and feeling happy. Kong enters and tells him, "Your mother left a message from America. She says you've messed up recently and need to tell her who the girl at the party was. You must also go on a blind date as a punishment, or your mother will make you pay." He stays silent and accepts his mother's decision. He goes to the blind date, which turns out to be with Yuri the owl. Yuri tries to talk to him, but he is busy texting Yun, telling her to pack her things. She refuses, and he insists, making her curse him out of frustration. He laughs and hangs up, then talks to Yuri. He asks her, "Did you know your friend is my girlfriend?" She responds, "Yeah, it's fine." He then says, "And you still want to be with me?" She replies, "Of course, if you go out with me, you'll forget about her." He says, "You're an owl and really gross, and I don't like people like you." He leaves her and walks away. He heads to the dance club where he sees Sang dancing with Yoon. Lee gets jealous and approaches, grabbing her and dancing with her instead. They share a romantic moment. Afterward, Yoon tells him that she agrees to live with him, but wonders what she'll do if she can't stay away from him later. He says, "Let's just live together and see how things go." She agrees. The next day, Yoon moves into his house. She's impressed by the house and even more by her room. When Lee leaves, she jumps on the bed, happy. That night it starts to rain heavily and she's scared of the thunder and lightning, unable to sleep. As the storm gets worse, she gets up and screams. Lee hears her and comes to check on her, finding her terrified. She hides in his arms and he's stunned, not moving. When she calms down, she's embarrassed and steps back, apologizing for being scared. He stays silent, takes her back to her room, and leaves. The next morning, he prepares breakfast and waits for her to wake up. When she doesn't, he goes to wake her and finds her wearing glasses. She explains she couldn't sleep because she was scared. He calls her stupid and takes her downstairs for breakfast. She enjoys the food and thanks him. He tells her, "I made breakfast for you today because you're new here, but you will clean, wash, and cook dinner tonight." She asks, "What do you mean? Did you bring me here as a maid or what?" He replies, "You have to earn your keep." She reluctantly agrees and suggests they set some rules, like no physical contact and keeping everything private. He retorts, "Physical contact? You're the one who hugged me last night." She explains, "I was scared and hugged you like a pillow." Annoyed, he says, "A pillow, huh?" He then takes her to her clinic. As he leaves, she keeps saying, "Bye, bye, bye," very happily. When she goes inside, she's surprised to see Sang. Lee watches her through his car mirror and gets angry seeing her with Sang. He stops suddenly but then decides to drive off, determined to deal with her later. Yoon goes into the clinic with Sang. She asks him why he came. He says he noticed she seemed really happy with him. She stays silent. He then tells her he's traveling to London next week, bids her farewell, and leaves. She then thinks about what to make for dinner. Lee calls her, yelling. She asks, "What's wrong with you?" He angrily asks, "Why did Sang come to your clinic?" She explains that he came to say goodbye because he's leaving. Lee feels relieved and says, "That's great, we should celebrate." She agrees and he hangs up. That night she returns home and starts cleaning a room. She opens his closet and finds the t-shirt she had put on him when he was injured. She's happy that he still kept it and places it on the bed. He returns home late and is surprised to find her asleep in his room. He feels happy and approaches her. She senses him, wakes up embarrassed, and leaves the room. She sits in front of the mirror, lost in thought, remembering him. She receives a message from her friend Jin, who has sent her a link. She opens it and finds it's a group for pet lovers. She sees a client who had brought her dog before has posted many positive comments about her, praising her a lot. This makes Yoon very happy. The next day, her clinic is filled with clients. She spends the whole day treating many animals, gaining more popularity and establishing her career. At the end of the day, she stays late to take care of an animal. Lee calls her, asking when she'll come home. She replies that she can't return that night. He gets worried and jealous, trying to call her again. She diverts the call and sends him a message saying she's busy. He feels relieved and happy, wishing her a good night and success at work. The next day, she's busy again and doesn't come home. This continues for a few days, with her being occupied and Lee unable to see her, missing her a lot. He feels distracted and doesn't know what to do. He talks to Kang, who suggests, "If you miss her, go visit her at the clinic." Lee agrees and goes to her clinic one night. He finds her asleep on the couch and sits beside her, lost in thought, looking at her. She wakes up to the sound of the doorbell, sees him, and is surprised and happy. He looks at her lovingly and leans in to kiss her. He tells her, "I really like you," and this time it's not a mistake. She feels even happier and a good relationship starts to develop between them. He takes her back home. They sit outside for a while, enjoying the atmosphere. John's brother Lee returns from America at that moment. When he arrives at Lee's house, Yoon sees him and says, "Stop right there, or I'll hit you with a cucumber." She asks, "Who are you?" He replies that he's Lee's brother. She feels reassured, and the two of them go inside to cook. In the meantime, at the company, Lee learns that his brother John is back and is at his house, which shocks him. He rushes home and sees Yoon with his brother. He says to her, "Come here." She agrees, but as she starts to walk away, John grabs her hand and says, "What's this?" He pretends and tells her to continue cooking with him. Lee gets annoyed, grabs her other hand, and tells John to let go. Yoon is confused and stands there, not understanding what's going on. That night, the three of them sit together, with Lee feeling frustrated about his brother's presence and wanting him to leave. Lee tells John to go stay in the annex, but John refuses. Lee leaves and goes to his room. He talks to Yoon, telling her not to look at or interact with John because he gets jealous. She responds, "But he's your brother." He says to her, "Whatever." She replies, "Okay," and they gaze at each other for a moment. The next day they go out together, happy as can be. He drives her to work. When he gets to work, he's surprised to find out his brother John didn't come to the office. He asks Kang, who tells him John claimed he injured his finger and went to the clinic. He asks, "Which clinic?" Kang says, "Yoon's clinic." Lee is shocked, realizing his brother is making excuses to be around Yoon, and decides to head to the clinic himself. John enters Yoon's clinic, complaining about his injured finger. She tells him, "This is an animal clinic, not for humans." He insists, "Whatever, just help me." She agrees and bandages his finger. Noticing he's scared, she laughs at him. He looks at her and says, "My eyes are just like my brother's." She remembers Lee telling her not to look at anyone else, not even John. She tells John, "I have a lot of work," and leaves to give an injection to a dog. John, being stubborn, follows her, causing the dog to get anxious and attack Yoon, injuring her hand. Lee arrives, sees Yoon hurt, and gets furious. He grabs John and says, "Stay away from Yoon or I'll beat you up." John tries to act innocent, saying, "I'm your only brother, would you really hit me?" Yoon intervenes, telling them to stop to avoid making the dog more agitated. Lee lets go and doesn't hit John. The next day, Lee checks on Yoon, making sure her hand is okay. He tells her to take a few days off, and she agrees. During this time, Lee and Yoon grow closer. He helps her with her hair, and they spend time together. John returns home but finds the door locked. He realizes Lee changed the password and sees him through the glass, telling him he changed the password and to sleep in the annex. John, annoyed, leaves but returns the next day, convinced by Yoon to join them for breakfast. After breakfast, John pretends to be helpless and asks Yoon to tie his tie. Lee gets jealous but doesn't show it. Yoon ties John's tie and they all head to work. In the elevator, John tells Lee that he likes Yoon and mentions how nicely she tied his tie. Lee gets even more jealous, grabs the tie, and tells John to stay away from her. John retorts, reminding Lee how his ex-girlfriend Ji-won chose him over Lee. This makes Lee even angrier. When they arrive at work, Lee takes the tie off and heads to his office. Yoon goes to John's office and sees a picture of John with a girl. She wonders who the girl is, but doesn't think much of it. Lee, on the other hand, is visibly upset, working while keeping an eye on John. John, seeing Lee's reaction, taunts him about his happy relationship with Yoon. Lee stays silent, but John shows him a picture of Ji-won with her engagement ring, happily married to someone else, and tells Lee they should move on from past mistakes. This stirs up feelings of anger and frustration in Lee, as he struggles to forgive his brother. That night, he returns home to find Yoon cooking. He approaches her, softening the mood. He asks her to promise to always stay by his side, and she agrees. Meanwhile, John goes to a nightclub trying to drown his sorrows. When he tries to pay, he discovers his cards have been blocked. He's surprised and sends a message to Lee asking for help, but Lee refuses. Yoon notices the situation and realizes there are problems between the brothers. John begs Lee, even threatening to reveal his name to the nightclub, which worries Lee. Lee eventually goes and brings John back, throwing him onto the couch. John, drunk, starts talking in front of Yoon, saying to his brother, "Will you keep holding a grudge forever? It's been 5 years and you still won't forgive me." He tells Yoon that Lee is a nightmare and she should run away because her life will be hell with him. Yoon approaches John, calling him stupid for saying such things about her love. She praises Lee and shows confidence in him, making Lee happy and causing Yoon to blush slightly. She then leaves them and goes inside. The next day, she gets the brothers to wash the sheets together to help them bond a bit. They splash water on each other, playing and having fun, but suddenly their mother appears. Seeing her shocks them. She takes them inside and asks what they've been doing. Yoon says they have an orchard, but the mother insults her and tells her to leave the house. Yoon agrees, leaves in tears, and Lee follows, refusing to leave her alone. He takes her back to her clinic and apologizes for his mother's behavior, promising to fix everything and asking her to trust him. She agrees, showing her trust in him. Lee returns to talk to his mother, telling her he loves Yoon and wants to marry her if she agrees. His mother gets upset and tries to convince him that Yoon is not suitable for him, but he stands firm. He leaves, and his mother and brother enter Yoon's room. The housekeeper finds a contract in the room while packing Yoon's things and shows it to Lee's mother and brother. They realize that Lee and Yoon had a contract for their relationship initially. The mother confronts Lee, who explains that they fell in love genuinely and want to marry. She agrees, but insists on testing Yoon's love. She gives Lee another contract, an agreement between him and Yoon before the wedding, asking him to convince Yoon to sign it. Lee hesitates, unsure how to bring it up to her. The next day, he goes to the clinic to check on Yoon and finds someone caring for her, which makes him jealous. He enters and asks, "Who is this?" Yoon replies, "My brother, relax." Lee feels relieved and greets her brother. They talk for a while and Yoon's brother realizes Lee is wealthy. When Lee leaves, Yoon asks him what he wanted to tell her, but he says nothing, and leaves without mentioning the contract. That night, Lee's mother visits Yoon at the clinic, showing her the contract and sarcastically commenting on Yoon's supposed expertise in contracts. She explains that the contract stipulates a 1-year trial marriage, after which she must gain her approval for the marriage to continue. Yoon gets upset and refuses, saying she doesn't want to marry Lee under such terms. Lee's mother is pleased, but Lee, overhearing the conversation, is shocked. After his mother leaves, he stays with Yoon, trying to convince her to trust him and agree to the contract, but she firmly refuses. He gets upset and tells her, "If you leave here, everything between us is over. Think again." But she remains silent and still refuses. So he gets even more upset, leaves her, and walks away. She starts crying and breaks down in tears after they separate. Both of them live through a period of sadness. He imagines her in front of him and remembers the moments they shared from the beginning of their acquaintance until they were happy together. She thinks for a while and decides to distance herself. One day, she takes her bag, closes the clinic, and walks away. He wakes up to find a video message from her. He watches the video and finds her saying she loves him. But she will distance herself because it's better for both of them, for the sake of their families. He gets upset, runs off, and goes to the clinic, but finds it closed. He sees Jen, her friend, with a cat that she had. He takes the cat and the album they made together. He returns home very sad. Her mother and brother see how much he is suffering. He goes to her room, sees the album, and watches the photos with her. He feels deeply moved that she cherished their memories together. He realizes she truly loved him. He asks himself, where is she now? On the day she went to her rural village, she sits in her family's garden, eating sadly. Her brother talks to her, saying he won't keep the clinic open for her for free anymore and will charge her 10 coins per hour for work. She tells him, "What 10 coins, idiot? I'll blow you up. Go to work and you're quiet." He looks outside and sees his brother for her. He is surprised. He goes out and stands with him. The two get to know each other. John went to fix his brother's relationship with Yoon and tried to help him. They both go inside. He comes to him, sits down, and begs her brother. He asks him about Yoon's location and pleads more for him to tell. Her brother feels sorry for him and tells him that she is in their family's garden. At night, Yoon sits and reminisces a bit, remembering her memories with him. She looks at her phone and finds many messages from him, begging her to tell him where she is. She thinks for a moment. He appears in front of her, making her happy, but then he disappears again. It turns out it was just her imagination. She realizes she misses him and decides to travel to him and return to him. The next day, she goes out, feeling excited, and books a ticket to travel to him. At the same time, he is on his way to her village to find her. His mother finds out and gets upset, not understanding why he is so attached to Yoon. He explains to her that Kang Yoon was the one who treated him when he was kidnapped, and that she is a good and kind person. His mother changes her mind and agrees to their marriage after learning that Yoon had saved her son's life in the past. Before Yoon leaves, her brother calls her and tells her that he found out where she is and that he might have already arrived. She is surprised and runs back to the garden. She searches for him and sees him standing there, feeling very happy. She runs to him and they embrace. He tells her how much he loves her, they reconcile and eventually get married. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and check out our other selection of recaps. Take care.